Mm.
I don't think we're going to do much today.
Right. Okay. Is everyone back? Oh, we'll just wait for Pam and Julian.
Yeah. I can't see anybody.
No, Pam and Julian aren't back yet.
Yeah, Iris, don't get frightened if Bear pops in. He's got some friends. He's showing them around.
Sorry?
Bear is just showing some friends of his around.
Oh, I saw a couple of people walk past the door. Actually, I saw them arriving.
Right.
They passed me while I was waiting at the gate.
Okay.
At least I think it was them. With the suitcase and baseball cap.
Yeah, that would be them. Okay, should we start? I think we'll start. They'll be back in a minute, hopefully. Okay, Iris, would you like to start? One sec.
Well, I've got
Yeah, there we go. Excuse me. Yeah.
the Parsha of Kedoshim begins with the statement, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." This is followed by dozens of mitzvot, divine commandments, through which the Jew sanctifies him or herself and relates to the holiness of God. These include the prohibition against idolatry, the mitzvah of charity, the principle of equality before the law, Shabbat, sexual morality, honesty in business, honor and awe of one's parents, and the sacredness of life. Also in Kedoshim is the dictum which the great sage Rabbi Akiva called a cardinal principle of Torah, and of which Hillel said, "This is the entire Torah. The rest is commentary. Love your fellow as yourself." That's it.
Yeah.
Muted. That's it. Short Parsha. Right. Okay. Thank you. So, there are two very significant commands in this week's Sedra, both regarding love. Right. Here's the first one. Wait a sec. Yeah. Yes. Go on. Who'd like to read number one?
I'll read that.
Go.
You shall not take vengeance or bear grudge against members of your people. Love your fellow Israelite as yourself. I am Hashem. Rashi. Love your neighbor as yourself. This is a fundamental principle of the Torah.
Right. So there's a famous song. Loving your neighbors yourself is a fundamental principle in the Torah. Excuse me. So that's what Rashi says, and Rabbi Akiva says also. So this is a great principle, possibly the great principle of the Torah, is love your neighbor as yourself. And here's the next one. Who'd like to read number two?
I will.
Oh, okay, Pam.
No, Brenda, go on. Go on, Brenda.
Okay. The stranger who resides with you shall to you be your citizen. You shall love each one as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I, God, am your God.
Right. Okay. Now, this is called the golden rule, right? Love. We'll pause the strangers for a moment. Love your neighbors yourself is like the golden rule of many religions, right? And not to be confused with the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules, I say. Yeah. So there's two ways of expressing it. There's love your neighbors yourself, and there's this one. Anna, would you like to read?
Yes. What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Go and learn.
So it's the negative form. What is hateful to you, don't do to your neighbor. In Rabbi Akiva says in the positive, the Torah says in the positive form also, love your neighbor as yourself, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. What's hateful to you, don't do to your neighbor. So there's a certain reciprocity to that, right? That if you wouldn't like someone to do something to you, don't do it, right? You know the problem with that, somebody say to kids, you wouldn't like it if someone did that to you. Say, I wouldn't care, right? You have the same problem with love your neighbors yourself, by the way. We've discussed this many times before, that it doesn't say love your neighbor, it says love your neighbor like yourself. So you have to have healthy self-love in order to love your neighbor. If you don't have self-respect and self-love, then you're going to struggle to have meaningful relationships, right? And we all know that if a person has an unhealthy relationship with themselves, they won't have a good relationship with other people. So, it's one thing to say, treat people with respect. Love is quite we have a famous thing, right? It says in the Ten Commandments, you shall love the Lord your, says in the Shema, you should love the Lord your God. And this question, how can you command love? Say the same thing here. You're commanded to love your neighbor. You're commanded to love the stranger. This is quite quite a tall order to tell someone who you should love. Let's have a look at what Harry Redner says in Ethical Life. Don't know who he was, but Rabbi Sachs brings him. Who'd like to read? Who hasn't read yet? Pam, would you read?
I'll read. Morality is the ethic of love. The initial and most basic principle of morality is clearly stated in the Torah. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. He adds, the biblical love of one's neighbor is a very special form of love, unique development of the Judaic religion, and unlike any to be encountered outside it.
Yeah, I can't comment whether that's correct or not, but it sounds plausible. So this biblical injunction is the basis of probably many societies and many moralities that say, oh, you have to treat your neighbor kindly, and you have to love your neighbor, basically. So much has been written about who is your neighbor and who is the stranger, and how do you love someone the way you love yourself? And you ask a different question. The question is, this week's Sedra is called Kedoshim, right? Kedoshim deals with holiness. You've probably come across this before. The very first line of the Sedra, I don't have it on the screen here, but it says, excuse me, Kedoshim to you should be holy. Right? What does holy mean? So it means special, distinctive, set apart. Kadosh means to separate or to be distinct from. So the classic question is, we already have loads of mitzvot that tell us how to act. What is this Kedoshim that you should be holy? Well, I know that. When I eat kosher food, I'm being holy. When I keep Shabbat, I'm being holy. When I give tzedakah, I'm being holy because I'm doing mitzvahs. What is this extra layer, this extra mitzvah, Kedoshim to you, that you should be holy? What does it add that we haven't already covered in the other mitzvah? Anyone remember the answer or know the answer?
The feeling behind it.
Broadly speaking, yes, you're getting there. So yes,
you can do mitzvahs because you know you're supposed to do them without actually feeling any love for anybody behind that.
right.
Behind it, you're just doing it.
Right.
But to love your neighbor, you've got to do the mitzvahs with.
Right. I mean, it's hard to love your neighbor without loving him, but yes, you can do lots and lots of mitzvahs that you can do without genuine sort of holiness and sanctity and whatever. So first and foremost, you have to be holy. You have to make a kiddush Hashem. You have to sanctify God's name. You do that through mitzvot. So there's a famous thing, I think, or Chaim, I don't know who it is. One of the commentaries says the person can be, and he uses the word bor in Hebrew, which means like a BWR in English. No one says that anymore. An uncouth, no one says that either. Person, right? It's in Yiddish, a very grubber person, a very coarse, very unrefined person, and yet you can be following all the laws of the Torah. Right, Rabbi Jacobson, I was told the story before. I'll repeat it for the benefit of those who haven't heard it. I don't think it's a great story. The chap who, very wealthy man, lives in a mansion, and he hears a noise, and he goes out and he sees this beggar rummaging through the bins, and the man says, "Oh, please help me! I haven't had food for days." He says, "Oh, we have some rotten fish we're about to throw out. Here, I'll give it to you." He says, "Thank you so much." He gives him the rotten fish. Anyway, that night the man says to his wife, I'm going to be late home from shul tonight. She says, why? He says, oh, you remember the chap we gave the rotten fish to? Well, he's only going to end up in hospital with food poisoning. He says, I'm going to go visit him. I'm going to do the mitzvah of visiting the sick. I'm so excited. So anyway, goes to visit him in hospital. The next day, he says to his wife, I'm going to be back late today. She says, oh, what happened? He says, you know, that man, unfortunately, died. So, he says, going to go to Levaya. I'm going to go and, go and comfort the family and visit the Shiva. He says, who would have thought that one stinky piece of fish could bring so many mitzvahs, right? So that's what's wrong with, you're doing lots of mitzvahs, but something smells off there, right? So no, Kedoshim to you can do all those mitzvahs. I mean, technically, you're probably not doing the mitzvahs, but a person could be a robot or automaton that technically observes mitzvah without having any kind of overarching sort of sanctity to it. So therefore, yes, you should eat kosher. Yes, you should keep Shabbos. Yes, you should visit people in hospital. Yes, you should go to shivers. Yes, you should give tzedakah and pray and whatever, all the 630 mitzvahs we do. But the overarching thing is you do it because God gave them to you to be holy, to sanctify the mundane. So if that's not happening, something's wrong. So Kedoshim is a chapter all about holiness, about sanctifying, making our lives meaningful. Why is this the place where the commandment to love your neighbor appears? It doesn't appear anywhere else in the Torah. And there's only one other place that the commandment to love the stranger appears. Now you're going to say, I'm sure we once said that it appears dozens of times. So the answer is there are 34 other places where we're told not to oppress or not to afflict or not to harm a stranger. The actual commandment to love a stranger, those are commandments of justice. But the other actual commandment to love a stranger only appears twice. Once here and once in Devarim. We'll just read that. Who hasn't read yet?
I haven't.
Oh.
You too must love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Right. So that appears twice in the Torah, but the 34 other times has more to do with treating strangers fairly. When we say strangers, by the way, we're talking about we're talking about primarily a ger toshav, which is a resident alien, right? So a ger normally is somebody that converts to Judaism. A ger toshav is a resident alien. I know the word alien, I think, is officially not a nice word anymore, but anyway, that's what they've always called people. So resident alien. My wife is a resident alien. A resident alien, someone who is a foreigner but resides in your land and abides by your laws, and therefore is afforded all the rights and responsibilities of a citizen. So in Israel today, that would probably be the Druze or the Bedouin. It might be a stretch to say it's Palestinian Arabs, certainly some of them, but anyone that might not be Jewish, but they live within your jurisdiction and they respect your laws, they have full rights. In fact, I believe in Israel today, certainly through the court system, it doesn't make a difference what religion you are, you would have access to the courts and justice and redress, etc. Curiously, let's see what else appears in this same chapter. Who'd like to read? Who hasn't?
I'll read that.
Go.
Do not make different kinds of animals. Do not plant your field with two kinds of seed. Do not wear clothing woven of two kinds of material.
Okay. Anyone know what these? So these are the three mitzvahs, what we call kilayim, which is planting different seeds together, grafting seeds. You're not supposed to crossbreed animals. I mean, there might be a reason for that to do with cruelty, but we don't know. And you're not supposed to wear clothing that consists of wool and linen, which is called shatnez. Anyone know what these three mitzvahs, broadly speaking, have in common? Besides they're all
Mixing.
Sorry?
Mixing different
Yeah.
species.
If you take a step back, what do we know the reason for them?
No, aren't they the sort of mitzvahs that we can't give an actual reason for? We can think about what might be a reason,
Correct.
but
Thank you,
there's
Albert.
no actual reason given in
Yeah.
Torah.
100%. So we have three types of mitzvahs. We know there's edut, which are mitzvahs that are testimonials, things like Shabbos or having a bris, having circumcision or Pesach. They're not 100% logical, but we understand the reason for it. Or tzitzit is to remind us of the commandments. They are a testament to something to do with our relationship with God. We have mitzvahs which are mishpatim, like do not murder and do not steal, which are civil laws that society would have. And we have chukim, which are mitzvahs we don't know the reason for, right? Milk and meat, however much people might claim to know reasons. And three examples here, shatnez. There's no particular obvious logical reason why you can't wear wool and linen together. It's a chok, it's something that God, just because. So question is, why would you have in a chapter that has mitzvahs which we don't know the reason for, the very logical, self-evident moral imperatives of loving your neighbor and loving a stranger? So is it just a load of random mitzvot, or is there a unifying thread to it? So the answer is there is a thread to it. There are a few, most ethical systems, right? You should be honest in business. Why? Because it's good business. People will give you good ratings on Google because you're an honest person. Therefore, you'll get more sales. That's a logical reason. Or you should be honest because otherwise you'll get arrested and done for fraud, right? Or you should be honest because it feels good. You give yourself a pat on the back. It'll be an ego boost for you. It's emotional, right? So it could be logical. It could be emotional. Could be because of the consequences.
It could be because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
In Judaism, we say be honest, not because it's good business, it might be, not because it makes you feel good, it might do, not because you're going to get imprisoned otherwise, because all of these reasons can be counteracted. Oh, no one's going to catch you, it's all right. Oh, it's a victimless crime. Oh, it's not actually good business, to be honest. You're just going to lose out. You do much better if you steal your competitor's secrets. Oh, doesn't make you feel good, to be honest. Feeling good doesn't put bread on the table. So, as Brenda just said, because it's the right thing to do, because God told me to do it. So, yes, don't steal because every child who doesn't even know how to talk yet, instinctively, if you say, did you pinch something, they'll cover it up like that because they know it's wrong. But yes, that's logical reasons for that, but it's more fundamental than that. So in Judaism, even if no one's watching, and even if it's a victimless crime, and even if no one's going to find out, and even if it doesn't even make you feel good, and it makes absolutely no difference to your business or to your financial standing, you do it because Hashem knows, because it's the right thing to do. So that's a very deep principle. And it's actually split into, but even beyond that, it's split. We've done this before. There's different kind of ways of looking at things. So this is from Yechezkel. I'll just read this. He says, they will go searching for a vision. A vision is from a prophet. They will look for priestly instruction in the law, which will cease. And the counsel of the elders will come to an end. This is talking about future times. It's not a good thing. But anyway, he says, they'll be looking for vision. They'll be looking for prophecy. They'll be looking for priestly perspective. And they'll be looking for wisdom. Okay? So it's three different things. The prophet, the priest, and the rabbi, the wise man. So, what does a prophet do? A prophet gives us prophecy about a society. There'll come a time in the end of days when everyone will do this or that, right? Relationships in society between us and God and between us and fellow humans. So here are a few texts which talk about the prophetic visions of morality. Okay? First one, who'd like to read? We've done this many times before. This is God saying why he chose Abraham. I always think we're back to you, actually.
Okay. For I have singled him out, that he may instruct his children and his posterity, tripping over my tongue, and his posterity to keep the way of God by doing what is just and right, in order that God may bring about for Abraham what has been promised him.
Right. So tzedek, tzedakah, which is righteousness, but we understand as charity as well, right? And mishpat is justice. Okay, here's another one from Hosea. Who would like to read? You probably know this from putting on your tefillin in the middle, in the morning, or from weddings.
Shall I read it?
Go.
I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me with righteousness and justice and with kindness and compassion.
Thank you. And the last one, which is from Jeremiah. Who would like to read that one, Julian? Doran?
I am the Lord who exercises kindness, chesed, justice, mishpat, and righteousness, tzedakah.
Okay. So when we're talking about...
For in these...
I stopped you. Carry on. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. For in these I delight, declares the Lord.
Yes. So we've got this tzedakah, chesed, mishpat, rachamim, mercy, all these attributes. So God says, how do you Why did I choose Abram? Because he will follow in my way. What is my way? Tzedakah, that which is right and involves righteousness, why is it called tzedakah? Because it's righting a wrong. One person has money, one person doesn't. So they're helping them. And mishpat, justice, chesed, compassion, kindness, and rachmim, mercy. So these are all qualities. These are prophetic words. Righteousness, justice, kindness, compassion. No one mentioned love, right? These are character traits. When the prophets talk about love, the prophets don't say, and you shall love your neighbor. The prophets talk about God's love for us, or the love we should show him. There are only 3 exceptions where the prophets talk about love. Let's see. Number 1, whose turn to read?
I'll read it if you like. Hate evil and love good, and establish justice in the gate.
Oh, there you go. It says you should love good. Okay, next one, Anna, do you want to read?
Yep. You have been told, O mortal, what is good and what God requires of you, only to do justice and to love goodness and to walk modestly with your God.
Thank you.
That's very
That
nice.
last, oh, sorry, did I? Oh, yeah, that's it. Yeah. And the last one, who's Jeff or Brenda? We're back to you. I think.
I'll do that. Thus said God of hosts, you must love honesty and integrity.
Okay, so no one talks about loving your neighbor or loving your stranger. If we look at the prophetic teachings, they're always about God's qualities of righteousness and justice and mercy, and that we should emulate them. And the only time we find the word love, or hate for that matter, seems to be to do with these qualities. You should love good and justice. You should love mercy. You should love truth and peace, right? So we're not saying you shouldn't love your neighbor or your stranger, but these are very much about societal norms, how people conduct themselves. Are they faithful to God or to each other? Do they act honestly and justly? Do they have integrity? Right? Does society have high morale that comes from people having integrity? Do people feel that society generally, that government is acting in their best interest, which is often not the case nowadays? So the prophetic vision of society is one of justice and kindness and tzedakah. It's not necessarily one of love. Now, what about the voice of wisdom? So you don't have this source on the screen, but the voice of wisdom, you look at the sources and teachings, talks very much about character. So, for example, it says in Psalm 1, person who's occupied with Torah will be like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, whose leaf does not wither. That's the voice of wisdom. So how will you do well? You'll find happiness. A good person will love God, family, friends, and virtue. Doesn't say love your neighbor or the stranger. So again, no mention of loving your neighbor or loving the stranger. Now, what about the priest? What about that holy aspect of it? If you recall, people normally say, well, a priest in Judaism, a Kohen, is a certain status. You had to be from a certain tribe. You were set aside. You had your temple service, right? But we know, of course, that we've learned previously that there's another aspect of being a priest, of being a holy person, which is not only limited to the children of Aaron. Let's see. I don't know whose turn it is to read, but whoever it is. This is right before the 10 Commandments.
You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel.
Right. And the next one, I'll just read quickly. It says, speak to the whole, this is from this week's Sedra, right? Speak to the children of Israel and say, you shall be holy, for I, your God, am holy. So when it comes to Kohanim, we're told they have to be holy. What does holy actually mean? So here's a very important text. I'm going to read this one as well, actually, because we need the Hebrew. It says, V'yisem li Kedoshim, you should be holy to me. This is from this week's Sedra. Ki kadosh ani Hashem, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. In big letters there. Va'avdil, I will set you apart, eschem, you, mina'am liyosni, from other peoples to be mine. I shall make you distinctive and different. Right? Now, one thing people often say is, people are anti-Semitic because they see a Jew walking down the street and they look different. Believe it or not, that's always been one of the hallmarks of Judaism, is to look different. Nowadays, that might be wearing a kippah or tzitzit, or the way you dress. There was always an idea of being distinctive. It was a badge of honor to be distinctive. Right. What does that word avdil sound like? Anyone? A word that you use at least once a week. Havdalah. Avdil. It's the same root. What's Havdalah? Havdalah is making a distinction. Hamavdil, the one who makes a distinction, it's the same verb, to make a separation. Bein Kodesh lechol, between holy and profane or mundane, not profane. Profane, technically profane is the opposite of sacred, but it sounds rude, like a profanity. And it's not. It just means the mundane, not the sacred. What do we say, right? Hamavdo ben kodesh lechol, the one who makes a difference, distinction between holy and non-holy, bein or lechoshev, darkness and light, bein Yisrael amim, between us and other peoples, bein Yom HaShishim Maseh, between Shabbos and the rest of the week, and we say Hamavdo ben kodesh lechol. So this is kodesh. What's kodesh? It's separation. It's being distinct. It's being distinguished. And this is what God says. You should be holy to me, just like I'm holy. I've distinguished you from other people. The other place we find this word is in the creation, where it says God made a distinction between light and dark and day and night and the upper and lower waters. And interestingly, what does God do last? He makes man in his image. Rabbi Kiva said this was an act of love by God. Beloved is man who was created in the image of God. So we've got the moral, the prophetic, which is love justice, love kindness, love mercy, love righteousness. We've got the sort of the wisdom of the Torah, which is, what did we say again? Character and society and love goodness and good qualities, and that makes you a good person. And then we've got the Kohanim, the idea of the priest, which is not just the Kohen, but it's all of us. And what makes us a nation of priests is being separate, being distinctive, being holy. Why do we have that? Because the same God who created the world, who distinguished between light and dark, between day and night, and separated between day and night and light and darkness, created us in his image. So the same way that God separates between light and darkness, we separate between the holy and the unholy. And we are a kingdom of priests, meaning you don't have to be a Cohen to do that. So where does love come in? Well, interestingly, the same way that God created us in his image as an act of love. So we see that therefore it is an act of great godliness to imitate God. We'll come back to that in a second. So just to recap, we've got everything has its place. You have the holy, the unholy. You have the sacred, the non-sacred. You have the permitted and the forbidden. And our job is to recognize these distinctions and teach them. So there are differences. There are rules. Don't make different kinds of animals, or don't wear clothing with different kinds of material. There are things that are distinct. But above all, because we're made in the image of God, we should emulate God. God made us with love, so therefore we have to use that love. So therefore we have to love humanity, we have to love the stranger. That's something that transcends the prophetic vision. It transcends the wisdom of Torah. It's something that goes back to the very essence of God. And therefore, when God says, I made you, I created you, I made you a kingdom of priests with the ability to infuse holiness, then saying, I created you in my image. And why did I do that? It's an act of love. And therefore, we have to have an act of love to other human beings as well. It's a bit of an interesting kind of circular reasoning. But what we're saying is, going back to the question, fine, I understand that you have all kinds of laws about character traits, or not laws even, ideas about character traits. I understand laws about not mixing things in order to keep things distinct. That's a hope. But why stick in a law about loving your neighbor or loving the stranger? The answer is because all these things, as we said, morality is not about doing it because you won't go to prison or because it makes you feel good or because it's good business. It's about doing it because Hashem told you to. In a similar vein, it's a chok. Hashem tells us, love your neighbor. It's not always easy. Love the stranger. Why do we do it? Because God himself created us with an act of love, and we have to strive to do the same. Be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. And I, God, love humanity, therefore you have to seek to emulate. It's not easy. We're all in the image of God, and that's why we have to love our neighbor and stranger, because we're all in the image of God. It's a basic human value.
Rabbi,
Yeah,
I'm sorry to bring this up, but the mixing part,
yeah,
transplanting animal parts into
yeah.
human beings, it's a whole worry for the Jewish community, I think. I know it's been passed by the Rabbonim that we can have transplanted animal parts into us, but it's still something that doesn't look right.
Right. So
It's a whole shear on its own, isn't it?
it is a whole spiel on its own. We generally only do it for life saving, like these pig valves and things like that.
Yeah.
So we're generally talking about crossbreeding. So, you know, breeding different species together or grafting different plants together. So I'm not used the use of animal material in human beings isn't necessarily covered under this prohibition, but also it would generally only be done for life-saving purposes, pikuach nefesh. So that would be an exception.
So are you saying if you make two different fruits from one fruit, you shouldn't eat it if they're
So I'm not sure if it applies within species. So I think we knew a chap that used to make roses, like designer roses. You could graft different rose bushes together. I don't think it applies within one species. I think it's like if you would, I don't know how you do it, but you'd somehow graft a wheat shaft onto a barley stalk or something like that. That would be against this prohibition. The crossbreeding of animals is slightly easier to understand because you potentially handicapping that animal. It's going to struggle with different, you know, sort of, I don't know. They still have mules. Mule is a mix between what is it? An ox and a donkey, a horse and a donkey. They still,
Also a donkey.
yeah. So it might come into that category, but it's interesting that we say it's a chok. It's not a law we necessarily understand. I mean, we do understand. The truth is, actually, I didn't say it actually comes back to this idea of separation, havdalah, and generally of sifting things into permitted and forbidden, and not mixing things. We don't mix meat and milk. We don't mix wool and linen. We don't mix animals. We don't mix plants. Not necessarily because there's anything inherently wrong with it. There is a kind of recurring theme of not mixing things, which is interesting. I mean, two of the biggest I think biggest what do they call it? Biosecurity scandals of, the last however many years that I remember, right? What did they say caused the mad cow disease, right? The CJD. You remember what they said caused it?
Feeding cows with
with meat
animal
Right.
brains.
So they used to feed them offal, supposedly, which is cow.
they were vegetarian.
Right. So it's not natural to feed cows with animal products. And the other one was that hand, foot, and mouth. No, was it the hand, foot, and mouth or the foot and mouth? Where there's a theory, which I never understood, that a cow had eaten a bacon sandwich or a pig had eaten a bacon sandwich. Do you remember that? And then it messed up the whole biosystem. So we do know that when something goes wrong in the sort of biodiversity of whatever, then it causes all kinds of problems because it's not a natural thing. If you go outside of your kind of place in the food chain, then everything goes wrong. So it's interesting. So let's read Rabbi Sachs, tying it all together, because there's a few disparate strands here. Right, Julian's always good at Rabbi Sachs. Go on, Julian, off you go.
Okay. I believe that there is something unique and contemporary about the ethic of holiness. It tells us that morality and ecology are closely related. They are both about creation, about the world as God's work and humanity as God's image. The integrity of humanity and the natural environment go together. The natural universe and humanity were both created by God, and we are charged to protect the first and love the second.
Interesting. I'm not sure why he brought up the environment here, but that's interesting.
No.
So
Maybe it was a special Shabbos or something.
Yeah. So going back to the original question, these commandments, why are we commanded to love our neighbor, love the stranger? It's slightly easier to understand that you should love justice. Okay, I don't love justice. Well, work on it. Tell yourself justice is a great thing. I really like justice. I don't know. How do you love justice? something that you're passionate about, I suppose. Yeah, lots of disparate strands there. Okay. I'm not sure we totally wrapped everything up, but a few interesting ideas. Anyway, happy to open up to comments or observations or questions.
I suppose it's kind of about respecting different realms. And when you start to mix, be it biological, seeds in the same field, you don't really know what you're opening up to and bringing in, and it can be damaging, and
Yeah.
the soil can be maybe ruined or overdone, and I don't know, just thinking around respecting realms and purity of distinct.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, definitely.
With animals, mating different animals, I believe it is the usual thing that the offspring of mismatched parents are themselves sterile. Mules certainly are. You can't have two mules creating baby mules.
Baby do.
And I think that other mismatches like lions and tigers mating together, I don't think their offspring can mate amongst themselves and create more.
Right, so it messes up.
I think that they generally, the offspring of mismatches are sterile.
It's interesting. So it messes up the genetics.
Yes.
And then you've got, the obsession with breeding perfect dogs, which is just ridiculous. Who came up with the idea that your dog wins a show because its paw is a certain length and its tail is this shape, and who cares? Someone decided that this is going to be I was going to say you don't have it with babies, but you do. I mean, that was the whole Aryan ideology, or designer babies or whatever. But yeah, it's not healthy to mess with nature in that sense.
And
and then is it?
oh, sorry, Anne, go on.
Sorry, you go on. No, you go on.
Yeah. When they muck about and they make other animals like Dolly, you remember
Yeah.
the sheep, yeah, which I'm not too, but was that for medical reasons?
Well, she was cloned. I don't know about cloning. Cloning is
Cloned, yeah,
interesting.
cloned. I couldn't remember what it was called. Cloned, yes.
Probably have a share on cloning something. I have to look up the often depends why you're doing things. Are you doing things for I once gave a class about animal testing, and animal testing is a terrible thing to do. But I once worked for a company called British Biotech. I used to temp a lot during school holidays, and British Biotech was, I don't think they ever brought a product to market actually, but they were a biotechnology, pharmaceutical company, experimental drugs. And my role was in the regulatory department. So I found it really fascinating when everyone said how quickly the COVID vaccine was developed, because we had clinical trials that went on for 18 months and of drugs, and every time there was an adverse event, it had to be reported to about 20 different agencies around the world. Very strict regulation. As part of my job, I would sometimes see reports of drugs that have been tested on, beagles in laboratories, possibly mice, things like that. Not very pleasant. On the other hand, these were cancer drugs. I remember thinking to myself, one of my parents had cancer and there was a chance to have a treatment, but it involved testing on animals. What would my view be? So I certainly think cosmetic testing on animals is completely unnecessary. There must be other ways, but life-saving drugs. So I gave a share on it once I looked into it, and it is permitted for life-saving purposes. One has to try as much as possible to mitigate any pain or suffering for the animals, but it would be considered, because we do in Judaism recognize that we're not just another animal. We are human beings. We're higher up the food chain. And we're more than that, we're a distinctive category of species, and therefore we are entitled to use the animal kingdom for our needs, but we should do so as carefully and respectfully as possible. So it wasn't automatic, no. I think, as somebody said, what was it? Question came up a few months ago: would a vegan eat meat if it was, if they were starving to death? I don't know the answer to that. And we know, of course, that you're allowed to eat non-kosher food if you're starving to death. Would a vegan eat meat, or would they stand on principle? I don't know. It's a good question. But you
A
don't, Judy,
friend
you
of
don't.
mine who was a vegan wanted to be continue to be a vegan, was unfortunately physically unable to eat sufficient vegan food to keep himself healthy.
Right.
And he had to go on back to meat for a couple of months
How
to build
interesting.
himself up again, and then become vegetarian rather than vegan. So
How
I
interesting.
guess that would probably be the same sort of thing.
Wow.
For health reasons, you might have to eat meat if you were a vegan.
That's interesting.
That was certainly
I've
for
always heard
him.
like kind of anecdotal stories about that.
He became like
Like,
a skeleton,
where someone's
apparently.
actually told that you need to eat meat for medical reasons.
Yeah.
How interesting.
He became like a skeleton, apparently. He was so emaciated, he just could not eat enough.
Right. So there you go. So that's really interesting.
Also,
Wow.
the fruits were the same, so flowers were
Um,
the same. You could do that.
You know, you hear these stories, so told you have to eat meat to survive. That's really interesting.
Different species. Or different plants. Right, we're
Okay.
So
talking
which,
about different flowers. Jeff said you can't mix, but flowers.
Can you put this different flowers in the same flower bed?
Yeah, I think you can do
Seeds
that.
are
It's
coming
not supposed to,
from-
it's grafting. It's when you actually try to graft one seed onto another. I don't know exactly how people do it, but I think that's the
Putting the
start.
same different seeds in is not grafting.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem to, well, saying that, it does say you shouldn't plant your field with mixed seeds either, actually, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Mm.
say
Oh,
that.
because it might create
I think it's because it will,
insects might
yeah,
cross-pollinate
yes,
things.
it will inevitably create that.
Same
But
with
it's
flowers in
interesting,
the
and
flower bed.
I didn't actually know until today, I just saw the source, that they're all regarded as chukim, as laws that have no reason to them. So although you might be able to say, well, it's fairly obvious if you crossbreed animals, it's not good for them, whatever. The ultimate reason we do it is because God told us to, and there is a common theme, and the theme is one of separation, of distinction, of, you know, as they say nowadays, stay in your lane. Which is an interesting theme that we find quite a lot. So, you know, society talks a lot about melting pots, and there's a general idea of that, right? Being distinctive and having distinctive customs and practices, and yes, being different is a Jewish theme. You know, I used to do school visits, a lot of school visits in Cardiff. A lot of schools would come to the shore. I do a few now, but not as many. One time I thought, I can't do all of these, I'll get someone else to do it. So I got one of the members of the shul to come in. I thought he would be quite good. And he started off by saying, you see this kippah? I said, besides, if I take this off, we're all the same. And I thought, actually, that's not what they came to hear. I mean, yes, you can talk about our shared humanity. They actually came to hear about what we do that's different from everyone else and why we have different laws and so on. So I actually thought that was a bit of a non-starter. This concept of separation, of distinction, of this comes down to the chosenness, but it's not, it shouldn't be triumphalist, but rather one of obligation. We have an obligation to be holy, which means sanctifying our everyday life and the things that we do. That's what it means to be holy. It comes back to what is Kedoshim. It's something that transcends the Torah laws, but covers all of them. Right, and that's why from Kedoshim we learn the concept of Kiddush Hashem, right? Doing something that is a positive thing, a sanctification of God's name, versus doing what we call a Chilul Hashem, where one profanes the name of God by literal translation, drags it through the mud. By the way, also, when it says that it was a great act of love that God created us in His image, so one of the explanations for that, when it occurs in Pirkei Avos, is because despite the fact that we as human beings repeatedly drag his name through the mud, as it were, you know, people say, you know, didn't do a very good job, did he? We created the image of God. Look how badly people behave. Nonetheless, he still did it. So that's an act of great love and kindness. So there you go.
So should we also think about it all in the sense that God created everything, and so we can take what He created as sort of being perfect, and why would we try? I mean, yes, we should emulate God
So
and the acts of love, but to then go beyond that to try and create
could be that to
new
do with
things, maybe.
To improve
Because
on God's work, you mean?
possibly. I mean,
yeah,
the
because
whole
isn't
idea
there
of
something on Shabbat that where you the one of the principle is that you don't create, just enjoy, respect,
right,
and
right.
honor what has been created.
Right. So I would say yes. The only thing is that the concept when people talk about tikkun olam is to repair the world is to perfect the world that is not yet perfect. So God created the world, but we have the job of perfecting it. Now, does that we usually take that to mean through our actions and behavior rather than through coming up with clever new species. But yes, so in terms of
Surely,
morality, in terms of the environment around us, the moral and social environment, we have the obligation. That's the whole idea of Tikkun Olam, that God created the world, that our job is to perfect it. How do we perfect it? By
yes, because surely Tikkun Olam, to repair the world, means
yes,
to put back into its original condition
right,
what people have messed up.
right. So you're right. So to perfect the world is not an accurate translation. You're right. Tikkun Olam technically means well, but Sakein means to. It can mean to fix or it can mean to perfect. So it could be both. But when we talk about healing a fractured world, if you learn the mystical origins, it says that originally there was this great light and it was too much and it all split and it was shattered all over the world. And this is into little pieces that we had to go and pick up. And that's basically our job is collecting the sparks. That's the whole Kabbalistic view of Tikkun Olam. So what's the original world? The world is like, sort of what do they call it? Can't think of the word. Before creation, there's a name for it. Primordial, world which is perfect with no, or you could say even before the eating of the apple and after eating the apple, also same idea. So that, yeah, you're right. So it depends how you translate tikkun. But I'm just saying that is it a perfect world? Yes, because Hashem created it, and a lot of what we say reflects that. And when is the world inherently good? Yes. If things appear bad to us, that's because we don't see the bigger picture, but we know there's a deeper reason for it. But that doesn't mean that we don't have an obligation to perfect the world. That is more a moral or religious obligation. I mean, it's a very kind of non-orthodox thing to say Tikkun Olam is all about social justice, and don't go on social media today. Every single person that's posted on, I don't know if anyone's on Twitter, but every single person that's posted a thing about Yom HaShoah, there's at least 20 comments below it about how this is hypocrisy and about Jews are no better than anyone else, and usually relating to Israel, but not always actually. Sometimes it's just having a go. And you think to yourself, gosh, in 2024, there's even people saying, I don't believe the figures of 6 million, all kinds of stuff, horrible stuff. So, we've got a long way to go with some of that, unfortunately, of that social justice and all that. But that's how we usually understand Tikkun Olam, yes. So I suppose in an extreme scenario, if somebody said, I'm going to prove on God's world by, I mean the same thing with what do you call it? Not cloning, genetic, I can't think what you call it.
Modification?
Engineering. It's a huge area of, I'm not sure, by the way, that genetically modified food is 100% kosher either, because I think it would come into this category, right? What are you doing? You're messing with the DNA. So you could say that it's not just about crossbreeding animals, it's about messing with DNA, it's about messing with genetic material. Don't mess with it, unless it's to save a life. So interestingly, I don't fully understand stem cell research. I know Catholics get very upset about it. I'm not sure we have a fundamental problem with it. You have to have moral safeguards in place, but anything that saves lives generally is okay as long as it's done in a sensible way. So that would be, genetic engineering in order to help, prevent disease or something is one thing, but, designer babies or yes, cloning for the sake of it probably would frown upon. Probably comes under, I'm not sure there's a specific halacha, but it would come under this broad category, I think, of messing around with different things and yeah, kind of like overstepping the mark in a way, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because we're not fundamentalists that we believe, you're not allowed to change the world, you're not allowed to, there are specific prohibitions in the Torah. I mean, if you take that to its logical conclusion, you're in danger of the kind of people that say, you shouldn't use medicine, just, God will heal you. But we don't believe that in Judaism. We believe that you have to use whatever means at your disposal. So absent a specific mitzvah in the Torah, I would say we generally believe you should use everything in nature and everything in the world at your disposal. So no, we might reject the internet because of all the rubbish and dirty stuff on it. We don't reject technology. I don't know about now, but the Amish in America originally they rejected technology. We don't reject technology, only on Shabbos. We don't reject technology. You have to use it in the right way. We don't reject innovation or technology or science or medicine. We celebrate innovations. I think it's probably a nuanced one. There's a lot of innovation that we would add. The world innovates, the world evolves, and we find life expectancy is longer than ever before because of advances in medicine, many of which probably involve, groundbreaking stuff, which might include some kind of quite interesting science, and which in another time, another place might say is messing with God's plan, and yet we do it. So I think it probably depends why. It's a complex one. Yeah. Interesting. Right. I think
All
we'll
right.
pause there. Have a good week, everyone.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
your holiday. Hope the weather improves for those going out places.
No, I don't think it will.
Okay.
No, I
It
don't
was
think
sunny
so either.
yesterday. Right.
Yeah,
All right. Take care, everyone. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good week,
Thanks for joining
Rabbi.
us, Anna.
Yeah, nice to see you, Anna.
Thank you very much for having me.
Welcome.
It was
Yeah.
brilliant.
That might be a
Lovely.
bit
Interesting.
might be a bit complicated. It's complicated for us.
It's great. It's there's endless stuff to think about. It's
Mhm.
really interesting.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, absolutely. Anyway,
All right. Bye,
have a
everyone.
good week, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
Rabbi. Bye, everyone.